Hey, reading group. I want to go through um, our next week. That is 9.3. We're finishing up our ninth module on our third week. Pretty exciting stuff. And last week I told you guys that we're going to keep working on our recycling and how it worked out perfectly because it is recycling week starts next week or starts this week. I'm making this early, so sorry. But here we go, kiddos. So I'm going to go away for a little bit and you will just get to see my things that I'm talking about, all right? So here we are, kiddos. Our knowledge map. This is where we're at so far. When we started off, like we always do in class, it starts off blank, and then we talk about different things as they're happening and we fill it in, and we haven't really got to do that together for a while. But this is where we would be right about now if we had been filling it in. And it starts off with the main idea of protecting the planet, and then it had these other things branching off from it, like act locally, solutions, and protect animals. And the things that we would have found under solutions would have been recycling, which is over here, planting trees, right? Because if we plant trees, it helps keep our earth from eroding, and it helps all kinds of different things, right, kiddos? And then we talked about reduce, reuse, recycle. And another solution would be turn urban lots into neighborhood parks or gardens. And then this over here would be a picture of one of those gardens that they were talking about. And composting. And that's another way of recycling and reusing our environment in a positive way. One other thing that would have been branched off would be protecting animals. Sanctuary for animals and sanctuary for birds and other animals. And in last week's story, we read about Kemp's Ridley turtles, sea turtles, and how you need to protect the endangered species so that way that they continue to exist, so they continue to live, right, kiddos? It's when things like that, when they're on the endangered list, we have to work really hard to make sure that they stay alive because they are all a part of our ecosystem, right? So here we go. This week's critical vocabulary, and I will be assigning the vocabulary and some work in Spelling City for vocabulary and for your spelling words, all right? So here are your critical vocabulary for the week. Ancestors. Your ancestors are the people in your family who lived long ago. A sentence. My ancestors came from Germany, Ireland, and Africa. The second word, swirled. If something swirled, it moved quickly around in circles. Looking down at the swirling water made me dizzy. Currents. Currents are flowing movements of water in a lake, river, or ocean. Our boat sped down the river with the swift current. 4. Sneered. If you sneered, you showed disapproval and lack of respect by the look on your face. She hoped he would like her idea, but he only sneered. The fifth word for critical vocabulary, outspoken. If you are outspoken, you say what you think even when others do not agree. Being outspoken can get you into trouble. It can, but it's good to have your own values and things that you are proud of and that you support too, right, kiddos? So sometimes being outspoken isn't bad, and sometimes it might not be always great if you don't use the right amount of tact, right? How you address people and talk to them. Critical vocabulary word number 6, canopy. A canopy is a roof-like covering, like the top branches of trees in a forest. The canopy of trees gave us shade from the hot sun. And the 7th word for our critical vocabulary, envision. If you envision something, you picture it in your mind. I envision my life the way I hope it will be someday. Okay, kiddos, so here is the author of the next story that we're going to read. Um, I'm going to give you a minute here to look at it yourself and read it a little bit, and then I'm going to read it too. Okay, kiddos, so you had a chance to sit there and read it a little bit. I know you might not have gotten all the way through it. That's okay. Jen Cullerton Johnson is a writer, a teacher, and a supporter of the environment. She promotes the idea of green literacy, or having children and adults read books about the environment. She shares her skills as an author with students of all ages through writing workshops. Sonia Lynn Sadler was born in Kansas. In addition to illustrating children's books, she also has a line of greeting cards. Sadler compared her art to storytelling, saying, "Sometimes a painting is like a little story within itself." Think about that for a minute. If you've ever just really looked at a picture or a painting or an illustration, can you make your own story from that sometimes, kiddos? I think I can. A lot of times things happening in the picture really help accent the story, and sometimes they have a story all of their own, and it's really interesting and exciting. All right, so kiddos, before we start reading, I wanted to also go through reviewing context clues. And I know that we've worked with this a lot this year. Like I talked about our synonyms and antonyms, and we review that every week, and we've reviewed that every week all year, just like we have about context clues. But context clues are words and sentences around an unknown word that can be clues to its meaning. And multiple meaning words are words that are spelled the same but have more than one meaning. You can use context clues to help determine the meaning of the word that was intended by the writer. So the words that are around that word that you might not know, or even if you do know that word, help you understand how they are using it. So example number 1 and 2. Number 1, if you are kind to people, you will make friends. Okay, so that would be our action, how we treat people, right? That is how they're using that word kind in this instance. In example number 2, what kind of birds live in this area? Well, that's totally different, right, kiddos? It's not talking about an action. Those birds aren't having an action of being kind to you. In this instance, they're talking about what different species are they? Are they a cardinal or a blue jay or a blackbird? So they're talking about the differences in the birds when they're using that word. Example number 3 and 4. That backpack is mine. Well, that's pretty explanatory. That's the word they're using there for mine is saying it belongs to me. It's mine, right? And then for number 4, how do people mine for gold? It's totally different. That's not saying that you are possessing something, right? It's not yours. Mining for gold is very different. Think about some of the different things people can mine and how they do that. If they're mining, you can mine for gold, you can mine for a lot of different things, and a lot of times you end up having to dig, right? You have to go into the soil or do different things in order to get those. Right, kiddos? Okay, so we're gonna do this one later. Now we are here. Here are your spelling words for the week. These are the words that you're going to be working on Spelling City. Retitle, towel, battle, coastal, metal, simple, eagle, special, total, trouble, nickel, gentle, barrel, model, untangle, ankle, marvel, juggle, squirrel, riddle, signal, fossil, quarrel, article. Did you guys notice anything in particular about those words? Think about it for a second. Yep, I noticed that too. They all end in the LE, the AL, the EL, right? They have that O sign sound at the end. There's even a tricky little one in there that had an IL. But they all have that ending sound at the end, right, kiddos? All right. Now, before you start reading, we're going to talk about the author's craft. And I know we've discussed this previously in the year, but I wanted to review it one more time because I want you to think about these things as you're reading our stories this week, or at least the first one for sure. So an author's craft is the language and technique a writer uses to make his or her writing interesting. It's how they communicate ideas to the reader. So a technique is voice, and what that means, or what it is, the author's writing style that makes his or her writing unique. So an example of that, a writer uses certain words to show his or her style. An author's voice may change depending on the genre of the text. So how the author is using their voice as far as how they're writing, their unique writing style may change depending on if it is a informational text, or if the genre is fiction, or if it is historical fiction. It may change. Now, they also talk about another technique is mood, the emotions and feelings of the reader while reading a text. So, mystery is an example of a text. Suspense or surprise. Fantasy, the mood they would want you to have are wonder or excitement. Article, if they're writing an article, the mood would probably be serious or thoughtful, right? And especially if they're doing an argumentative text where they want to convince you to their opinion. They're probably going to be serious and pretty thoughtful about how they're getting their opinion across to you, right, kiddos? An anecdote, a short, funny, or interesting story related to a character or events. While on a school field trip, a teacher tells her students about a field trip she once took with her classmates. And reading kiddos, you guys have heard me tell you way too many anecdotes this year when we're doing things, right? You will never forget what an anecdote is. Language, vocabulary, precise nouns, sensory words, and vivid verbs that make the text more interesting. An example of that. Selma ate popcorn. Each kernel of the buttery popcorn crunched loudly in Selma's mouth. So that language was pretty vivid, right? And it was sensory, and it really got you interested. And you kind of became part of the story in that instance, right? You could almost taste it or smell the popcorn. We've all smelt popcorn and how it tastes, right? Hyperbole, exaggerations that make things sound bigger, better, or more than what they truly are. That's a good idea. That's the best idea I have ever heard in my life. Okay, that would be a hyperbole. I'm pretty sure it probably was not the best idea that the person had ever heard in their life, but if they used it, it gets your attention, right? All right, kiddos, so here is the first text that I have assigned to you. Now, like I said before, I do assign this to all of you on our HMH site. And so you can answer these things on the HMH site, or you can answer them in your textbook. If you do answer them in your textbook, you need to shoot me off a picture. Send it to me on Seesaw or remind of the questions after you have answered them, please. So as you prepare to read Seeds of Change, notice and note tough questions. So our genre this time is a biography. And we've talked about what biographies are before. A biography is the story of a real person's life written by someone other than the person. Okay, so if a biography, I would write it about, if I were to write a biography about Helen Keller, I'm writing about Helen Keller. But if I were to write a book or something about myself, it would be called an autobiography, right, kiddos? So a biography is the story of a real person's life written by someone other than that person. Authors of biographies present events in a sequential or chronological order. So they do it in a chronological order of generally that person's life or things that have happened to that person during their lifetime. So they'll start off with their early life, the middle years of their life, and their accomplishments and things that have happened to them, and then their later years of their life. And if the person is still living that they're writing a biography about, that's as far as it goes. If the person is deceased or has passed away, then they talk about when that person passed away, when their life ended. Okay, kiddos? So authors of biographies may use literary language and devices to present major events in a person's life. Biographies include third-person pronouns such as he, she, him, her, his, hers, they, them, and their. Now remember, pronouns we use in the place of nouns. That's right, you guys are correct. So pronouns are used in the place of nouns. All right, kiddos. So you're going to set your purpose. Think about the title and the genre of this text. What do you think the subject of the biography is known for? What are some things you would like to learn about this person? And write your ideas below. So you're going to need to fill this out, type it in here before you start reading the story. Now, if you're not going to do that on our website, you need to write it down in your textbook before you read the story. Here again are our critical vocabulary that we talked about previously. And we talked about our author already. We went through and read this. So if you want to read it again, you most certainly can. All right, kiddos. The next thing after you have read it, you need to do the collaborative discussion. Yes, I realize it's not really collaborating with anyone because you're at home all by yourself since we're not in class. But I still want you to do these questions. So if you need to go back and look at what you've read on the HMH site, you may do so, or you can even look in your textbook, right? Because that you have access to that. So look back at what you wrote on prepare to read page. Well, you're not going to be telling a partner, but you're going to think about 2 things you learned from this text, then work on those questions below. Support your answers with details and example from Seeds of Change. Take notes for your responses when you speak. Use your notes. You won't be speaking to me, right, kiddos, since we won't be able to share. I'll be only able to read what you've written, but that's okay. So I want you to make sure you're using complete sentences. It's more than a one-word answer when you're answering these, right, kiddos? So you're going to go through, you're going to answer here to both of those questions, those 3 questions. And when you're finished with that, I also am going to have you do the write a speech page. So you're going to look at the prompt here. In Seeds of Change, you read that the life of environmentalist and Nobel Peace Prize winner Wangari Maathai, I probably really slaughtered that name. Imagine that you have been invited to speak at an Earth Day celebration for younger students at your school. Write a speech to tell them about Wangari's life. Plan to include key events in the order in which they happened. Don't forget to use some of the critical vocabulary words in your writing. So here's your plan. Identify key details from the text about Wangari, write events in order, or write numbers next to them to show the order you will tell about them in your speech. Now, if you're going to write numbers, that's perfectly fine, but another way of doing things in an order, you would say first, next, then, right? You use those words that you would show sequentials, right, kiddos? Or chronological. Both words can be used interchangeably, right? Now, write your speech about Wangari's life. Make sure your speech introduces the topic, summarizes the main events in Wangari's life, tells events in the order in which they happen, includes facts, details, and examples from the text, and provides a concluding statement that sums up the information. And here you go. You can write it there. Like I said, you can also write it in your textbook, right, kiddos? That is where we're at for now. I will probably be making another video just to talk about where we're going from here for the rest of the week. But this is pretty much the main, your main assignment for the week. So after you're done with this, there's really not much else to do other than the spelling and the vocab like we talked about. And then I will probably send out another video going over a couple more things. All right, kiddos? So keep working hard. You guys are doing awesome. You're doing amazing things. I miss you all. I'll see you later.